everybody. Welcome back to the Life Money Balance podcast. I am your host, Dr. Preston Cherry. We're here to talk about the tools and topics to help you let your life lead your money, where your life and money are working concurrently to help you create and achieve your life's design and live aspirationally. Let's chop it up. Wow, we have a very special guest on the show today. And I reached out to a friend of mine. She said that she listened to my parents a couple of episodes ago and said, listen, we out to talk about this and chop it up about this. And marriage is on the topic, on the brains of a lot of people out there. And they're like, okay, how does our money and our relationships align? How do we navigate marriage? How do we align our money and our relationship and our values and our future? And we have a special guest who's been in the financial planning, serving individuals and households for many years. Lazetta Rainey Braxton, my friend, how are you doing?
Oh, Dr. Cherry, it's my honor to hang out and chop it up with you today in the topic of marriage.
Oh wow, yes, for sure, for sure. Let me tell y'all who Lazetta Rainey Braxton is. First of all, when you have three names, you are somebody. Okay, okay, all right. I've affectionately shortened Lazetta's name to LRB, kind of like MJB, But or Beyonce or something like that. When you have one name, you are somebody. Let me tell you. And I jokingly say that, but Lazetta is a respected person in the financial planning arena. I mean, she has been serving households and helping them with their life money balance, their life journeys for going on a couple of decades now, right, Lazetta? She is
Yes.
an owner of 2050 Wealth Partners with Rianka Dorsonville. That's her co-owners of that firm, and also CNBC Digital Council Advisor, a multiple award winner, so Investopedia top advisor, a thought leader and expert not only on serving households but also on diversity, equity, inclusion, woman to watch, visionary award winner, leadership award winner. Listen, I'm bringing out the
Oh my.
James Brown, the Tina Turner, So I just want to give you your flowers, Lazetta, because you have been trailblazing is overused for a lot of folks. That ain't you. So thank you for all you've done for and continue to do for households across America and a world, because you have a worldwide reach. So thank you for all you do.
It's an honor to live into the calling. So I appreciate you listing out all the awards, and I'm just grateful to be doing what I love with the
Yes,
people
yes.
I enjoy doing it with. And you're one of them, Dr. Cherry.
Well, I appreciate that. I appreciate friendship, and you are someone who has one of the awards you won is like the Big Heart and Spirit Award, I think, and that is authenticity right there. So authenticity, realness, and we chop it up on the show. So that we talk about chopping it up, right? And we chop it up a lot, on and offline, right? And so let's get to that. And that's a good pivot to what we're going to talk about today, which is which is like you have to have some realness and authenticity and cor- vulnerability, courage, all
Yes.
of this in order to enter in to a marriage, love somebody, and want to be loved. And then on top of that, marriage, like it or not, is an entity, right?
Yes.
So let's go. Let's dive into that. Let's dive into what marriage is on the emotional side, and then how that then translates quickly into finances. So, how did it start out for you, far as marriage is concerned? I mean, the emotion side first, and then how did the finances start entering in the conversation?
Yeah, so I want to kind of frame it in a way of what you said about marriage being an entity, right? So
Mm,
when you think about an entity, hopefully you're thinking about partnership, you're thinking about aligned values, aligned vision, alignment of shared resources. So often we want to separate, because you said let's start with the emotional side. When it
mm,
comes to engagement, people want to say, is it emotional or is it kind of theory, the EQ versus IQ? And
mm,
so my view is whether you are in a marriage partnership or in a business partnership, it's still a partnership. It's still a
mm,
covenant. It's still the same principles that should align. And that's how a lot of people get in trouble with money in marriage and money in business. Don't
mm.
separate the two. So your question to me was, how did my husband and I, Brad, get started? And that's almost 25 years. Yes, and I'm still young. I'm still
That's
young.
right.
Still
That's right.
young.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right.
Right. And so, we did. Obviously, there was an emotional side, an attractive side, and conversations that really showed us that there was some chemistry there, right? And
Mhm,
so, as I make the parallels to a business, would you work for someone where there's
mm,
no chemistry?
mm, mhm, mhm, mm-mm,
Right? How are
mm-mm,
you going to be able to give your full self? There's no chemistry, right?
mhm,
So, you see me doing the parallels because I anchor financial planning in human capital. It's what you're giving to the partnership, what you expect to receive in return. So there is this money balance. So there is balance in general that you're seeking for aspirationally. You see, I listen to you, brother.
yeah, yeah.
I listen to you.
I appreciate it. You
Right?
can you
Got to
you
bring
you
in the
connected.
bread.
Yeah, yeah, you connected it for sure. You can
Yes. And so, when we came together, it was, putting everything on the table, not just the chemistry side. It's like the money too, right? Because what you think about your life and what's important to you, it's going to show up in your money.
mhm. No,
So
yes,
is there alignment,
for
right?
sure, for sure.
Right. So I'm like, you can't separate it. You can't
Mm,
separate the chemistry and say, no, my finances is here, my love is here. No, you
mhm.
got to be on the same page.
And then that starts early. That starts early. And for those that are entering, I mean, I'm entering the fiance stage. I've been in a relationship for about 5 years now, and then you've been married for 20. What was it? 20? How many
It'll be
years?
25 this year.
25. 25. So that I was about to say quarter century.
I know. Go ahead. That's what it is. It's the silver one, I think.
Right? No, but no, that's
Yeah.
beautiful. But that does start, early. Is there and I'm here's a question: what would you have, what, not knowing what you know now, is there something that you would have talked about then early on, for those that are entering in this stage of marriage? Because we're going to go ahead and walk through the marriage
Okay.
tenure.
Yes. And this is a couple of questions that we ask just in general when it comes to engaging our clients at 2050 Wealth Partners, right? What's your first memory of money?
Hmm.
Right? What are you most proud of as it relates to your money? What would you have done differently? Right. And so, what you're hearing me, the questions that I'm asking, if someone is clear for themselves about these answers, then when you hear that from your partner, you know where they're coming from. You know
Hmm.
what matters to them. You know what impacted them in their relationship and how they view money,
Hmm.
because oftentimes a lot of the fighting or discord is because the individual is not clear about their
Hmm.
relationship with money, right? Which also goes to say, well, who's going to ask you these questions? Is it going to be in your marriage counseling? How many pastors are really clear about relationships with money, right? And how that shows up? don't know, right?
Mm,
So when I'm thinking about my financial planning clients, when we're asking these questions in our discovery meeting, it's fascinating because we're asking them to them as a couple. So they
mhm.
get to hear each other respond. And sometimes it's surprises, and sometimes it's, I knew that, right? So that gives us a framework about how to engage, what to listen to differently for each as an individual and then collectively together. So I would say, you know me, you got to do the work.
You got to do the work. Yes, that hashtag is phenomenal. Yeah, do the work, doing the work, right?
Doing the work.
Doing the work. Say, I'll be checking you out too now, doing the work, and you gotta you gotta do the work. And uh, and I like what you said there, which is when you ask the questions, there has to be some willingness there to
Yes.
ask the questions, enter into the dialogue, uh, conversations necessarily. They can be difficult sometimes, but those conversations are necessary to, rather than, because that's a reframing too, right? If somebody just says that the conversations are difficult all the time, you never have them. Let's have this necessary conversation, unveil information, as you said, right? So when this information comes along, uh, then it's about alignment, right? And then discussion. Uh, do we ever get surprised by information that we discover or unveil from our partners, from our spouses? And then the second part of that question is how do we go about aligning when we unveil these either similar or different perspectives? So surprise and then alignment.
You have to have safe space, right?
Mhm.
No shame, no judgment, the ability to be messy
Mm,
and handle messiness and discomfort.
mhm,
That takes a lot of courage. That takes a lot of patience. That takes a lot of vulnerability, right? When you're really trying to put yourself in your spouse's shoes and hoping that your spouse is doing the same for you, so that you are not anchoring what you're doing in your own best interest.
mhm, mm,
Ooh.
mm. Well, look at that. Look at that. So
And
you
I'm just chuckling because you were asking about in the beginning of the marriage what you should do. It's an
going
ongoing
right,
thing.
right, right. And I suppose you get better at it because you have more information as you go too. And also, I guess that's a question that I'm asking. Does it should it get better because you have more information as you go? Because individuals grow over time, marriages grow over time. So does money. Hopefully, it does. Uh, Situations grow over time. Uh, that said, you get more familiar with your spouse. So with more information and more growth, uh, does handling the business of marriage uh, get a little bit more efficient, even the quote unquote messiness.
Let's talk about what you said about more information. There's a lot of information that's out there,
Hmm.
particularly with financial planning. That's our area. But how
Hmm.
do people digest the information?
Hmm.
How do they reflect on the information? How do they filter what is um, related to undercurrents that a
Hmm.
person may have because they haven't really figured out that relationship with money and what's important to them? You don't know sometimes what you don't know, right?
Hmm.
So if you can come back to the notion that there is aligned values, that there was a vision to be together and there was a partnership in play, then you put some guardrails in there to make sure too much time doesn't pass for which growth is stunted because you're
Mm.
stuck,
Yes. Yes. Yes.
right?
So a framework for frequency, discussion, and alignment, like you said, so it doesn't get stale. Uh, how
Don't
was that?
get
How was
stale
that
and
work for
stuck.
and stuck? Right. Right.
And I'm gonna tell you how stuck happens.
Yeah.
Life,
Mm,
busyness,
mm,
right? That's why we talk about having money dates. You think about relationships, they get stale if you don't nurture it.
mm,
You can't go with the status quo and think it's gonna take you. 2.5 decades. Mm-mm. No, sir.
Right.
No.
So money dates, those are a thing because we hear about those in the information that we read, as people suggest those, as planners we suggest them, uh, and people are like, "What money dates? Come on, what are you talking about?" Right? What goes on in those? I mean, because those are a real thing. I mean, we joke about them, but no, for sure. I mean, we would. What is your take on them? I have my take, but what is your take on a money date, and what should come out of one?
Money dates, I just see is like, where are we, right, in
Mhm,
terms of goals, right? So is it short term, midterm, long term, right?
mhm,
If you are on autopilot, what I mean by that, you good with your house, you good with your job, you know
mhm,
what's coming in, right? You are just set. And then what ends up happening sometimes when there's a pivot, a move, a job change, right? There has to be some strategy around these conversations. What we got to handle as a couple, what the new employer is going to happen as a couple, what do we want to do in terms of schooling? Do we believe still in public school versus private schools, right? So there's kind of the regular maintenance. How we
mhm,
doing? Check in.
mhm,
Then there's this business strategy saying there's been a life change that's happening. What is our strategy? What is our strategic plan to say, do we have to dip into our cushion account, our emergency savings?
mhm,
Do we have to have a greater line item because public schools are not the best? We're going to have to do private. What is that trade off? And as I'm talking to you, I'm thinking about your parents, right? One of their important notions I heard them say was that they wanted you to live, in the same home,
mhm,
right? As your dad was looking for different jobs and the like. And so when you as a couple kind of have your visions, you recheck the vision, see how your resources is aligning with the vision, and then figure out how you're going to pivot together and how does that impact some of those buckets that
mhm,
you have, right? And what does that mean going forward as
mhm,
well?
mhm. Uh, oh, that's fabulous. Like, and what you were just explaining was that is we're talking about the theory, so to speak, of the business of marriage. What goes into it, what these conversations mean. What they can contribute to the health of the marriage, right?
Yes.
The emotion of the marriage, um, and aligning values. But then you started getting into how this information can affect the bottom line. All right. When we
Yes.
start extracting this information from our conversations, from the money dates, from the conversation that we had from the beginning throughout the marriage and continuing across the continuum, okay, how does that information start informing the numbers? Right.
And I always say, don't be afraid of the numbers.
There,
And
yes.
that's how a lot of people get in trouble because they have it in their head about what's happening. But I tell you, when you see it,
Hmm.
when you see that net worth statement, your assets,
Hmm.
your
Hmm.
liabilities, when you're seeing what we call a lifestyle plan, what's coming in and what's going out and what's left over, right? Then you know what you're dealing with, right?
Hmm.
It's in front of you.
Right. And so
And
those.
so couples got to be able to want to review the financials. That's business. That's entity work. That's partnership work.
Ooh, yeah. So the numbers, and the numbers, the numbers don't lie.
They don't lie.
The numbers don't lie, and then also too, they do inform. They do inform where you are, or they tell a story. They tell a story where you are now, and then where you want to go. And it says, right, it says, where do we need to place, or you mentioned the word buckets, where do we need to invest? This is where, like you say, we're getting into the business part around that. Okay, now that we have where we are aligning where we are and where we want to go in our value system, wherever those values are, okay, here are the numbers. You mentioned trade-offs. Was that a great word? Great word. Where do we start investing in and across the business of this marriage in this household? How have you seen when you worked with couples, where those numbers, either it's an awakening or is encouragement? how are the numbers, connect with people?
And the numbers are really driven by preferences.
Mm,
I see it in a lot. Where do you want to live? Are you living in a high cost area, low cost area, right? Some people like, no, I was raised in a rural town. I'm not going back to a rural town. There's nothing there, right? Like big city, live in big city, but can you make the money that you need to live comfortably, right? So if you're thinking about couples navigating jobs, geographic locations, preferences for vehicles,
mm,
you know, right? So we talking preferences. Preferences for a W-2 versus a 1099 versus entrepreneurship, right?
mhm.
So when you're talking about this growth, it's not linear.
Right.
People wanted to believe that it's linear. When it comes to couples, what are your preferences and how do they align, right?
Mm.
So if you like custom made suits and not off the rack, right? So what does that mean for your
Right.
wife who says, I want Louis Vuitton shoes? Can we have both custom suits
Mhm.
and Louis Vuitton shoes?
Mhm. Mhm.
That's a negotiation there. Can I start my business and not work for 2 years or get my MBA for 2 years and not bring in income? What does that mean? That means spouse, my husband has to bring in more income. That's
Mhm.
trade offs.
Mhm.
That's negotiation. That's preferences.
Preferences, right? Preferences, and also
You got to keep it real.
you do have to keep it real. You had to keep it real, and that's a real. You talking about chopping it up? Ooh, you talking about chopping it up for real? Because those conversations, you have to have them, right? And then you may be having you drink a choice, maybe you don't drink, whatever it is, but you having that chop up conversation. And what you just said, Lazetta, for those that are watching and for those that are listening, you with your spouse and the numbers are sitting there and you're having a conversation that's healthy. And then when you had that trade off conversation, you may have a slight pause for a second.
Yeah, so you made me pause. I'll be like, what? What you mean by
Right.
that? Right?
You,
You try it's real. Think it's wrong, but you want that, but you want that. We're not gonna have that.
right.
So that's why I said about guardrails, right? Frameworks.
Right.
So what we ended up doing was like a mad money. It's just like we each get X amount of money, right? Let's say two, three, $400 or whatever. That's our money, right? So if I want to get, my red bottom shoes and they cost X amount, then my mad money is what I spend, what I accumulate to buy that. Don't talk about my shoes. I won't talk about your custom suits,
Right.
right?
Right.
So that's why I was like, you get frameworks that help kind of navigate what is going to be conflict. It's two individuals. That is to be expected.
Right.
But what can you do to get back on the same page and honor each other's preferences without judgment? Ooh.
Ooh, there you go. Hey, speak on it. Speak on it. See, speak on that. See, this is why. See, that's why we chopping it up about this, right? Because you right there, preferences and perspective, right?
Right.
uh, perspective. Two individuals are coming together with different perspectives, and people need to be heard with their
Yes.
preferences and their perspectives. And it does talk a little bit about that too. Is like people are coming together with two different perspectives, same goal. And there's a framework, and for the listeners, I'll post a little bit about this, about a framework for conversation, because you said this too, Lizetta, which is uh, a framework. Because you said guardrails, great word, guardrails. What is the framework, the guardrails for this discussion, right? um, you know, how do we digest a perspective? Because one, we have a goal, we have an agreed upon goal that we want to have, and then what's the importance of someone being heard, their perspective, and not necessarily combating about it. We have a similar goal. We just may have two similar, different perspectives, and want to be heard.
You had alluded to the work that I do in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, right?
Okay.
And I do that as a consultant with Lazetta and Associates. And I say all the time, the greatest DEIB work is in a marriage, right? Because you're talking about different perspectives,
Yes.
different preferences.
Yes.
How do you have these conversations where people are being heard, courageous conversations, listening? And it keeps going back to putting yourself in that person's shoes as best you can. what it ends up happening because of our own experiences that could have trauma related to it, you can't hear clearly because you still haven't done the individual work. Because
Mm,
when you have done the individual work, you have capacity to hold space for others because you are sure what you're hearing is not an attack against you, it's
mm,
not questioning your judgment. And that's why we can't hear half the time because
mm,
our lenses are dirty. They're fogged up. Fear, obligation, guilt.
mm, mm. Fogged
I'm
up,
back
man.
to doing the work. Yes.
The hashtag doing the work. That's what I'm talking about. Like you said, you.
Yeah. So when you're listening, are you actually listening
Yeah.
from the lens of the person who's speaking? And
Hmm.
I have to be honest, oftentimes I couldn't hear because I had too much stuff. You kind of think about the person talking and you're listening, and it's just a whole bunch of static in between.
Hmm.
And a
Because of
lot of that is both individual work, trying to have to clear up the static that's in their own spaces.
wow. So it's that inner work and fogging up those lenses, and then also the ears, right, are clogged as well. So it's our hearts, somewhat our minds, spirits, and then our ears
Yes.
are clogged a little bit before we can even understand the perspective of the other person. Oh,
Hmm.
so we got to invest. That's another investment. So that's another
That is an
investment.
investment.
That's another investment in the business, right?
Yes.
Is an investment in ourselves in order to invest in the business of our marriage. That filters down or filters into, not down, filters into the household, right? Because if the
Yes.
individual in the marriage is, or if they're not together, then the household and the finances are not going to be together either. What are your thoughts about that?
Oh, come on now. We know when people are stressed out, what do they do? Overspend,
Yeah.
hoard money,
Hmm.
behaviors. It shows up
Hmm.
in your money,
Hmm.
right? So if you are, and this is what I like to say, the money rhythm, right? So if you on one accord, you're having the conversations, then your money is working. You're not stressed about it and give you all that energy other than comfort. And you're going
Hmm.
about your business,
Hmm.
growing your firms, getting your promotions, raising your kids with fun because you're set. You're good,
Hmm.
right? But if this side is disruptive, it's going to show up in your money
It's going to show because they're misaligned.
because they're misaligned.
Because you said at the top of the show, you said Preston, let's talk about the alignment of, you said, the business of marriage, because we're an entity, and the values, right? The values of life, of life, and the money, right? And this is so crucial. It's so critical. Why do you think it's so important? This is a good way. This is probably wrapping up the show right here. But why let's communicate with with really just uh, with importance why this union, the being on the same plane with all that what we are saying, is so important as an investment, and to get a return on this investment, uh, to see a return on this investment, to see our household thrive, right?
Yes.
Why do we need to take care of this to see our household thrive, not only in life but with money?
Let's think about this practically. If you are in your groove, right? You're feeling good about yourself, you being nice to yourself, you taking care of yourself, right? You just feeling good. Just think about the lightness, the light that comes from decision making. Because that's how a lot of people get in trouble with their finances. When they come to a crossroad of whether they should spend or invest, it's a decision making process. And if your mind is clouded with stress, with strife, how you
Mm-hmm.
going to make a good decision about your money,
Mm,
right? And so if you have someone in terms of partnership that you're just trying to be the best version of you with your job, with your money, with your life, then it's like good decision making, you flowing, right? And if something gets off rhythm, then you're able to take a step back. It's not like you at a fight or anything. It's like, whoa, something's off rhythm.
Mm.
Let's have a discussion about it authentically, what direction we're going, and we're going to still go with it with knowing each other's best intention, because ultimately this is the life how we envision it together. We want to be able to travel, we want to be able to raise our kids, here, we want to be able to X, Y, and Z, and those are the pictures that were painted in the beginning and that are just along the way. So you just keep coming by your values, loving one another, being on the same core, being the best version of yourselves, and let your money kind of guide along with that, ride along with that.
Right. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
right.
So you ride and die with your spouse and your money.
That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. That's right. And keep that love fresh too, y'all. We talked about life and
Yes.
money, having a conversation. I mean, so the takeaways here is to really, invest in the business of your marriage, and that means emotion, health. We kicked off the show with, hey, you got to have some chemistry, and speaking of which, listen to you some Kim, so get you you know, download, just Google Kim and get you some love songs in your life so you can kick that off right. Because if your love ain't right, right, then you can't even get to the life and the money. So keep that energy flowing. Then you can have these conversations can get better if your love is right, right.
Yes.
But
There you go.
so have that right, no doubt. And then what we talked about today is having frequent conversations about money. Be vulnerable. Be courageous. Uh, have necessary conversations. Uh, do work within yourself. And Lazetta is an expert in that. And she shared some gems about doing work within yourself. That way you can come together and collaborate and have these discussions to unveil information that's needed to inform the numbers. Lazetta, uh, what else do we need? What did I forget? And what do you want the audience to know? What is that one or two things that you want to wrap up the show with, that you want people to say, hey, do this in order to help your life be successful?
I'm gonna piggyback on what you said, and this is my mantra too: keep love alive. And when you do that, then that gives the person the space to be who they are, their partner, and just let your money, support the way that you want to live,
Hmm.
you individually and you collectively.
Hmm. No doubt, no doubt. Thank you so much for coming on to the show and dropping these gems on phone, these money dimes on folks. They can take these away and invest in their lives. What are you doing right now? Where can people find you across social media?
Yes. Yeah. So from a financial planning firm, 2050 Wealth Partners.com. And for my consultant DEI speaking is Lazetta.com. So if Oprah can be Oprah.com, I can be Lazetta, one name.com.
You sure can. You sure can. That's what's up. Thank
Yes.
you
And then
so.
my social handles is at Lazetta Braxton. So be sure to follow me on all the
Yeah.
socials.
Yes, and Lizetta is Googleable. So find her with all her handles and what she's doing. You can find her chopping it up on CNBC as well, and some other news media. She has columns. So just not only her social media handles, but just Google her name, and you will find her as well. So thank you, Lizetta. I appreciate you coming on the show. All right. That's what we have for the show. Thank you, listeners, for chopping it up with me, Dr. Cherry, on the Life Money Balance podcast. And we'll see you next time. And if you like what you see and like what you heard, like and subscribe to the YouTube channel. We'll see you next time. Cheers.